Hello, my name is Matt Max, and man, I have been dying to do this. I want to talk about one of my favorite topics in the whole wide world, psychology. To be more precise, not just psychology, but the psychology of manipulation. Let's start with an example. In an experiment, researchers confronted a turkey mother with a stuffed pole rat. Okay, a pole rat is the natural enemy of the turkey. So, as you would expect, the turkey mother attacked the pole rat right away. But here's the interesting part. The researchers placed a tape recorder inside the pole rat. It was some time ago, so back then they had still had tape recorders. And the tape recorder played the sound of a turkey chick. What happened? Suddenly, the turkey mother heard that cheep, 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 and she stopped attacking. Not only did she stop attacking, she actually now guarded the stuffed pole rat. Because the sound of a turkey chick is a trigger, it's like a switch. As soon as the turkey mother hears the sound of a turkey chick, it's a reflex, it's a trigger. She behaves completely different. She cannot change this. This is called a fixed action pattern. And not only turkeys do have fixed action patterns, humans have fixed action patterns too. For example, if you see a baby or if you see a dog puppy, you find it cute. Why? Because the head is disproportionately big. That is a trigger that triggers your reflex, and you are like, oh my god, this is cute. It's a fixed action pattern. Now, here's another example. A Harvard psychologist, Alan Langer, made the following classical experiment, okay? She wanted to skip ahead in the line of the copying machine. She did two experiments, okay? Experiment number 1, she asked, I have 5 pages to copy. Might I use the Xerox machine? Second, she asked, I have 5 pages to copy. Might I use the Xerox machine because I'm in a rush? Now, in the first example, 60% of the people complied. In the second example, 93% of all people complied. That's not really... that makes sense, right? That makes sense. It's a good reason, so yeah, okay, that makes sense. But she did a third experiment. Here is what she said the third time around. She said, I have 5 pages to copy. Might I use the Xerox machine because I have to make some copies? Now, this sentence doesn't make a whole lot of sense, now does it? There is no information in it that could convince you that she needs to skip ahead. How many people let her skip ahead? 93%. As it turns out, you don't actually need a reason. The word because itself is enough for you to be okay with letting her skip ahead. The word because is enough reason. That's quite cool. Now, by itself, the fact that we have fixed action patterns is no problem. You can actually argue that some of those patterns, like we finding babies cute and want to care for babies, are actually beneficial for society. They help society to keep together, to stay together, to work together, right? Well, that is true. But here is the problem. Psychologists and in recent history, neurologists have started to figure those patterns out. They know how to trigger those patterns, and they know how to use those patterns against us. They know how to use those patterns in advertisement, so that you are convinced to buy a certain product, that you are convinced that a certain political view is the better one, etc. pp. Hence why I am making this video, to educate you about all the ways you are being manipulated every single day. let's actually get started, shall we? Alright, so the first part of manipulation I want to talk about is reciprocation. Basically, it means that when you receive a gift, you feel compelled to give a gift back. Makes sense, right? But not only do you feel compelled to give a gift back, you feel compelled to give a gift back that is bigger than the gift that you originally received. And you feel compelled to give a gift back even if you do not like the other person. Now, what does this mean? Let's actually look at a couple of experiments, okay? Dennis Reagan of the Cornell University conducted the following experiment. 2 people were put into a room. They were told this experiment is about the rating of art, and those 2 people should rate art. One of those 2 people was the research assistant, right? The other guy didn't actually know that. Now, this person, let's call him James, alright, behaved absolutely identical every single time. He had a script, right? He behaved absolutely identical every single time, with one exception. In one case, he did a break. He made a break for 2 minutes, then he came back empty-handed. In the other case, he went for a break, and then he came back, and he brought the test subject a Coke for free. That's kind of nice, right? After they were done rating the art, James then told them that, you know, I actually want to sell those raffle tickets. If I sell the most raffle tickets, I get $50, which was kind of a lot back in the 70s, apparently, because I want to buy a new car. Now, as it turns out, the persons that received a gift from James bought twice as many tickets as the persons that did not receive a gift. And the persons that did receive a gift actually paid more money to James than the Coke originally cost James in the first place. Because they felt like they were owing James a favor, right? Now, I said that it doesn't really matter whether or not you're liking the person or not. And the best example for this is Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna was, or actually still is, a Hindu sect. Now, they did something special. They needed money, okay? They needed money. And they grew quite big in the 60s, late 60s, 70s with the hippie culture. They grew incredibly big, so they needed a lot of money. How does an organization like Hare Krishna make any money, you ask? Well, they did so in quite a brilliant way. They did the following. They put Hare Krishna people on airports, on train stations, where bypassers couldn't dodge them. And then you would just exit the airport, and suddenly a Hare Krishna would give you a flower. Right? And in your surprise, you actually weren't able to deny it, right? You suddenly had a flower. You wanted to give it back, but the Hare Krishna wasn't taking it back. And after you took the flower, the Hare Krishna was like, now, do you want to make a donation? And this worked incredibly well. This extremely basic tactic worked incredibly well. Nobody liked the Hare Krishna. They were incredibly obnoxious, but it worked incredibly well. It worked so well that they could afford to fund 321 centers throughout the entire world, largely with donations made by this tactic. Now, the majority of people were just throwing the flowers away, but the Hare Krishnas would get them right back out of the dumpster and give it to the next person. That is the power of reciprocity. And it still is successful. Every time somebody puts something in your hands, they're trying to use this tactic, okay? I had something really funny happen to me one day. I just learned about all this manipulation business. And a solicitor came, and he had a magazine, and he gave the magazine to me. I was like, okay, that's a boring magazine. He was like, yeah, wouldn't you like to buy a subscription? I was like, no, I don't really want to buy a subscription. Again, I was young and I just learned it, so I was rebellious and I didn't want to comply, right? So he was like, okay, in this case, I have to take the magazine back. So he was trained, right? He was trained to use it as a gift to get me to get the subscription. And if I didn't want the subscription, he was trained to get the gift back so they do not lose the 10 cents this magazine was worth. That was kind of cool. So, where is the connection between what I just told you and videos, you ask? Rightly so. Well, whenever on YouTube you have a giveaway of some sorts, that's the reason why this is happening, right? And also, they want you to comment a lot, because if there are a lot of comments underneath videos, they are ranked higher in the YouTube search algorithm. So that's the other reason. You walk through the city. Suddenly, the person in front of you is looking into the sky. What do? You look up too, right? This is one of the many examples that show how much we are influenced by people around us. One of the most well-known and dangerous effects of this is when you have an accident, for example, a car accident, and people just keep driving by, okay? Why do they do that? Well, first of all, I can happily report that it's not because humans are monsters and bad. That's not the case. Studies have shown that if it's clear to people that there is an accident, and if it's clear to people that somebody is in danger, they help in 100% of the cases, or in very close to 100% of the cases. The problem is that more often than not, you cannot be sure whether or not the accident just happened. Maybe somebody already called the ambulance, maybe it's just a drunk lying there and it's not a heart attack, and so on and so forth. You are unsure. This being unsure is the key, okay? This being unsure is the key. Why? When we are unsure what to do, we look around us and we try to get a clue what we should do by the actions of the people surrounding us. That is the main problem. If you have a car accident and a car is driving by and then another car is driving by and you're behind the second car, you're like, 2 people just drove by, probably nothing. You will most likely keep driving. An experiment conducted in New York shows this. It was in a street in New York, and there was smoke seeping underneath the door. And when a single bystander came by, right, he called help in 75% of all cases. This was before cell phones, by the way. Now, the researchers did a couple of different variations on this experiment. In one of those variations, they had 2 research assistants just walking by, not even looking at the smoke. In this case, the third person coming by, which was no research assistant, which was a normal bystander, called help in only 10% of all cases. He's unsure what to do. He sees there are 2 people walking by doing nothing. Must be nothing, right? So this is one of the main problems with us looking around us what to do, or looking at other people what to do when we're unsure what exactly just happened. Another interesting effect is the so-called Werther effect. Werther was a book, Die Leiden des jungen Werther, published by Goethe, or actually written by Goethe. And in the book, the main character, Werther, commits suicide. After that, the suicide numbers skyrocketed. Young people were reading this book, and the suicide numbers skyrocketed. Suddenly, everybody was starting to kill themselves, right? They were unsure what to do. They read this book. Okay, Werther is killing himself. I maybe should kill myself. And this still happens today, right? This still happens today. If there's a suicide story in the news, suicides go up for a couple of months after this. Another little bit funnier fact to get away from suicide. In Italian opera, since 1820, you were able to pay a group of specialists that would clap or cheer or shout bravo at certain parts of your opera, so that it's more likely that other people would cheer too, right? And the prizes were different. Just cheering, and bravo, and so on and so forth. And this now evolved into what we have today, which is canned laughter. Now, nobody likes canned laughter, right? Everybody I know is like, I hate canned laughter. Why do they even put it in there? It sucks. TV stations do not use it. Well, the reasons they use canned laughter is because studies show it works. People are more likely to laugh themselves, and people find the show more funnier if it has canned laughter. Because if we hear a joke, we are not sure if it's funny or not. Look around us, we try to get some social proof that shows us that it is funny, right? So canned laughter does work, which is very cool in my opinion. Now, it gets more interesting, however. If we have two persons, okay, if we have a stranger and if we have a person that we can somehow relate to, maybe it's a friend, maybe he's from the same internet community of our choice, maybe he has the same jobs that we do, we trust the person we can relate to more. We trust the person we can relate to more. This is the reason why in advertisements you have those random people from the street, right? Oh, this random people from the street likes product. I'm a random person too. I guess I would enjoy product too. Right? That's the reasoning behind that. And it works. Again, it works. Interestingly enough. And this is also the reason why YouTube people, right, use inside jokes. If you hear a YouTube personality make a joke from Reddit, for example, in his videos, that's not a coincidence. He does this on purpose. He wants to bond to the Redditors in his audience, right? The people who don't understand the joke just ignore it. But the Redditors are like, he's one of us! Awesome! Right? Because you can relate to people that are similar to you more. There was an interesting experiment conducted by researchers of the Columbia University, and it was like this. There was an envelope dropped on the street. Within the envelope, there was a wallet and there was a letter. Now, the letter clearly shows that somebody found a lost envelope and wanted to send it back, but he lost it, right? So that was the story, and it was clear from the letter. Now, they did this experiment 2 times. One time, the letter was standard English. Okay, perfect English. In the other case, the letter was broken English, and it was clear that the person who wrote the letter was a foreigner that recently came to America. Now, in the first case, 70% of the people sent the wallet back. In the second case, only 33% of the people sent the wallet back, because they can relate to the person who is an American more than to the foreigner. Another thing that really plays into this is how much we like the person that is trying to sell us something. Tupperware does this really good, right? Tupperware does this really well. If you do not know how Tupperware operates, here is how they operate. They hire women, and the women get a percentage of the sales. So the more they sell, the more money they make, right? Now, they invite friends home to them. So right there, you have reciprocation, because they just got invited home, right? And they sell a lot of Tupperware because it's a friend that sells it to you, right? It's more difficult to say no to a friend. The final part of the social interaction chapter of manipulation is authority. Now, yes, I will tell you about this one experiment that you already heard a couple times, but it is the best experiment for authority. It's the milligram experiment. Now, following happened. A test person was invited to participate in a study about memory and about teacher-student interaction. So, 2 test persons, one was a student, the other one was a teacher. what the teacher didn't know is that the student was a research assistant. Now, following was the experiment. The researcher was together in a room with the teacher and would ask questions to the student. And whenever the student answered the questions wrong, the researcher told the teacher to give the student an electric shock. And every time the teacher gave the student an electric shock by the press of a button, he had to switch a switch and increase the voltage. And the voltage got up to about 450 volts. Now, the research assistant got instructed to reply differently based on the voltage. First he would answer, and then he would start to scream louder and louder and louder and louder, and at about 300 volts he would suddenly stop screaming altogether. Okay? So that's what the teacher heard. Now the question is, how many teachers did go all the way up to 450 volts? And keep in mind, for all the teachers knew, they were killing an innocent person. 300 volts, they didn't hear anything anymore. How many people continued until they arrived at 450 volts? Because they got told to do so. 65%. 65% of all test subjects went all the way to 450 volts. They didn't like it. They didn't want to do it, but they did it anyway. They did it anyway. We respect authority so much that you can get us to do basically anything. 65% of the test subjects went all the way up to 450 volts. And nobody stopped before 300. And here is an interesting quote by Milgram. I observed a mature and initially poised businessman enter the laboratory smiling and confident. Within 20 minutes, he was reduced to a twitching, stuttering wreck who was rapidly approaching a point of nervous collapse. He constantly pulled on his earlobe and twisted his hands. At one point, he pushed his fist into his forehead and muttered, "Oh God, let's stop it." And yet, he continued to respond to every word of the experimenter and obeyed to the end. Mankind's respect and obedience for authority is overwhelming, and it is widely used in advertising. Whenever you see an expert talking about the health of your teeth or get this product and your dishwasher will live 20% longer, right? First of all, he's most likely not an expert, and they are playing to this whole authority thing. The question is, how much does it take for you to take somebody you see as an authority? Maybe it's enough to have a nice suit and a nice tie, and maybe it's enough to have a little voice, right? The question is, now that I speak with my normal voice, and now that you will see that I'm indeed not a suit-wearing person at all, I very much am a t-shirt person, and that not only do I wear a t-shirt, but also I do not only have a tattoo, but my tattoo covers my whole arm. How much do you respect me now? Am I suddenly not an authority anymore because I'm not speaking in a low voice, because I'm not wearing a nice suit anymore? How much does it take to make you believe that somebody knows what he's talking about? I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about cognitive dissonance, and I want to talk about reactance, okay? Reactance is a clever word for scarcity. So, have you ever watched a TV show that wanted to sell you something, and it had like a counter, only 10,340 units left? did you ever wanted to buy something and suddenly there was a limited edition, right? Why do they do this? Why do they do this? Why does this work? The reason this works, in simplified terms, is that they are threatening to take freedom of choice away from you, and you don't like to get freedom of choice taken away from you. An example, you want to buy a game, and for some reason you go into a brick and mortar store, and there is a limited edition and a normal box. And you're really not sure if you should buy the limited edition, right? It has like a figurine, but you're not really a super fan, so you don't need the figurine necessarily. And suddenly, somebody comes from behind and takes the second to last copy of the limited edition. There's only one copy of the limited edition left, and you start to think, if I don't take the limited edition now, maybe somebody will come and take the last one. Then I cannot get it anymore. And you think, maybe when I'm at home, I will regret not taking the limited edition now. Maybe when I'm at home and the limited edition is completely sold out and I have no longer a chance to get the limited edition, maybe I will regret it. I should get the limited edition now. That is scarcity. That is how it works. And that is the reason why unique things are worth so much. Why post stamps that have, some little error on them are worth so much. Right? That is why censored information is suddenly valued so much. That is why sometimes car salesmen will be like, oh, I see you like this car. I'm really sorry, but I just sold the last one. I could look if we still have one. You want to buy it, right? And actually, child psychologists were able to show that this phenomenon exists in 2-year-olds. Okay, it's not something that society teaches you. It is something that is ingrained in your very being. It's something that's ingrained and hard-coded in our very being, which is why it is such a powerful weapon, right? And I have to confess, a couple months back, a good-looking blonde came to my door, and she said she was selling Red Cross memberships. And I didn't want the Red Cross membership. But, and I was like, okay, just give me the formula. Just give me the formula and I will look it up later. And by look it up later, I mean, put it into the trash bin, right? But she was like, oh, no. You have to do it now because, right, I have to file it later. It was at this point that I realized that this wasn't, she wasn't from the Red Cross. No. That was a trained professional solicitor, okay? That was a trained professional solicitor working for an agency hired by the Red Cross to sell memberships, okay? She knew what she was doing. And she knew she had me. And she smiled a lot, she was very nice. And she used cognitive dissonance, which I will talk about in a moment. And to my shame, I have to say I'm now a Red Cross member. This really worked. I knew what was happening to me. I knew what she was doing. I knew exactly what was happening when she was saying, oh yeah, I'm a student too. Yeah, of course she wasn't a student. I knew what was happening and it still worked. That's the best thing about manipulation. You can know it, but it's still difficult. To not fall for it, right? It's really easy to fall for it. All right, so now that we knocked reactance out of the way, let's go to another really interesting topic, which is cognitive dissonance. What is cognitive dissonance? Okay, imagine you're a Chinese government official, all right, during the Korean War, and you have American prisoners of war, and you want those Americans to go back to America and be communists. And you want those prisoners of war to inform on each other. You want them to come to you and tell you, a couple prisoners have planned an escape tonight. You want that to happen. How would you do that? How would you do that if you were a Chinese official? Well, I can tell you how they did do it during the Korean War. And they did do it with cognitive dissonance. Here's what they did. They started slow, okay? Those were trained professional soldiers, Korean War. They were trained to only tell them name, rank, and number, right? Name, rank, number. That's the only thing they told them at the beginning. How did they manage to completely turn them around? They started slow, okay? They isolated one. They didn't use torture. No. They isolated one. And they said, America isn't completely perfect, is it? Something really small like this. America isn't perfect. That's a really small thing. And even patriots, right? Even the most diehard Republican patriots would agree that America isn't perfect, right? Everybody would agree. So they would start like this. America isn't perfect now, is it? Right? And maybe the prisoner of war would agree. And then they would go a little step further. Well, can you tell us why? Can you give us a list of 5 reasons what's wrong with America? Like this. And then maybe he would agree, right? And he would write it down. Or they would ask him to write it down. And they would ask him to sign it. And later on, they maybe had a discussion group. They did this, right? They had a discussion group of prisoners. And then they asked the one, we talked earlier, I have this list signed by you, right? 5 reasons what's wrong with America. That's what you really believe, right? You wouldn't sign something you don't really believe in. You wouldn't, right? Could you read this out loud? And he did, right? He read it out loud in front of the group. Suddenly, he identified himself with what he said, right? In front of the group, because that's what he was doing. So it must really be him, right? And then they would go a step further and would be like, can you write a short essay about problems in America? And he wrote a short essay and he signed it. And they would send it via radio to everybody in the POW camp and to the troops in South Korea, to the American troops in South Korea. And suddenly this American patriot, suddenly he was a collaborator. At which point did he become a collaborator? The Chinese made him a collaborator by just taking those really small things and using that against him. And once he was a collaborator and he was named a collaborator, he started acting like a collaborator. More and more and more. Suddenly he was telling the Chinese government officials they have planned an escape. Suddenly he started working together with them. What happened? How does this work? The answer is cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a widely accepted psychological phenomenon. And it basically says the following. You want to be consistent with your previous actions. That's it, okay? You want to be consistent with your previous actions. If you do something or say something, you will feel pressure in the future to act accordingly. Or to justify it. Right? So in our example, the prisoner said negative things about America, and he did it in a very public way. And suddenly he felt this pressure to justify his previous actions and to act consistently with them. Right? A couple other examples. People who bet on horses, okay, they bet on horses. You have one horse. Right after they bet, they think the chances the horse is winning are way higher than they do right before they bet. It's the same horse. What changed? What has changed? What has changed is that they made an action, they bet on this horse, and now they try to justify the action. Their brain is adjusting the way they are thinking. It's an unconscious reaction, right? And suddenly they think, my horse has a pretty good chance of winning. This will be the race that makes me a millionaire, Another example, initiation rituals of any descriptions, right? fraternities, initiation rituals. Once you've gone through an initiation ritual, you are way more loyal. Why? Because you have gone through so much, you have endured so much, that the fraternity must be good. Otherwise you wouldn't have done it, right? Otherwise you wouldn't have endured all of this, right? It must be good. You can give them fact and you can argue with them that it indeed sucks, right? They will justify it because they endured so much, so it must be good. Same thing with special forces initial tests, right? Yeah, of course you have to weed out the weaklings, but the other reason they have this really hard tests for all kinds of special forces is because this way you're like, I endured so much, it must be really awesome. That is cognitive dissonance. There are tons of experiments that show this to be true. One of the coolest ones is the following. So a group of psychologists went around, well, they didn't identify themselves as psychologists, but they went around a neighborhood and they asked a group of people, house owners, to put a small sign, like this big maybe, on their house that says, drive carefully. Okay, 2 weeks later they returned. And they had a picture with them. And the picture showed a house, a beautiful house, completely blocked by a big, ugly billboard that said, drive carefully. And they were proposing, can we use your lawn to put this ugly, big, that's not what I said, but they showed them the picture, right? This billboard up. Now, what was the result of this? Of the control group that didn't got the small sign, right? Only 70% agreed. However, of the groups that got the small sign 2 weeks earlier, 76% agreed to get the really big billboard. What happened here? Well, they got the small sign. And now, right, they did something, and they did something in public, right? And now suddenly, they feel the urge, the pressure to be consistent with it. So they accept the really big billboard. But it gets even cooler. They found this really interesting, the researchers, and they did a slightly different experiment. And this time they went around and they had a petition, a Keep California Beautiful petition, right? And, you know, that's something that everybody signs. And then 2 weeks later they came, and again they had this billboard, drive carefully. And of the ones who signed the petition, 50% were okay with getting the billboard. So even though the petition did not really have anything to do with careful driving, right, it still means they are more likely to get the billboard, because now suddenly they view themselves as people who do something for the society, who do something for the community, right? And that means that you have to be really careful, right? You have to be really careful. Even really small things, even really small commitments can have a great influence. There are tons of advertising campaigns where win a prize if you write what is best about product, right? What happens once you write what is best about product, you in the future will feel the pressure to act accordingly, and you will buy this product more. You have to be really careful about those small things. YouTube people do this also suddenly, right? If you write a positive comment, they got you, right? If you write a positive comment, they got you. This concludes the psychology of manipulation. I hope you learned a thing or two. And maybe leave a positive comment. My name is Max. Thanks for watching, and tune in next time.